This film is of particular interest from a historian's perspective, as it shows wonderful shots of what New York City was like in the early 1930s. We take a time travel trip back to around 1935 and travel by boat in southerly direction over the Hudson River, starting to the north of the George Washington Bridge. We then pass Grant's Tomb. Later on in this film, we pass the Chelsey piers, from where before around 1935 most ocean liners departed to many destinations in Europe across the Atlantic Ocean. The second part of the film shows New York's piers and ferries at the very south of Manhattan. The film finishes with splendid footage of a journey up Harlem River. Here we start our journey about a mile north of the George Washington Bridge, with a view of the west shore of the Hudson River towards the Ross Dock picnic area. On top of the cliffs near Fort Lee, we see a radio facility with two antennas. These are splendid views of the George Washington Bridge. Its construction started in 1927, was completed in 1931 and opened on the 25th of October 1931. The bridge connects Washington Heights in Manhattan, New York with Fort Lee, New Jersey. Between 1931 and 1937 it was the longest suspension bridge in the world. This footage is extra special because it shows the bridge with only one single deck. From 1958 to 1962, the 6-lane lower deck was constructed beneath the existing deck for reasons of increased traffic. As we travel further south down the Hudson River, the camera swings to its west bank to show great views of Grant's tomb, the mausoleum where General Ulysses S. Grant is buried. Grant played an important role as a general in the American Civil War and later was the 18th President of the United States. He died in 1885. The mausoleum is located in Morningside Heights, which is part of Upper Manhattan. It is modeled after the mausoleum of Halicarnassus, which was built around 350 BC and located in present-day Turkey. Next we see the Riverside Church, built in 1930, so almost brand new when this was filmed. The area has changed beyond recognition ever since, and nowadays is far more upbuilt. We now move further south along the Hudson towards the Chelsey area and its piers. These piers were built around 1908-1909 and opened in 1910. They served all the great ocean liners until in the mid-1930 the city of New York opened larger docking facilities north up the Hudson River, piers 64 to 99. It is interesting to note that these piers line up with the New York West street numbers by subtracting 40 from the pier number. So for example, Pier 88 lines up with West 48th Street. Because the names of the companies that use the Chelsey piers are poorly documented, it has not been easy to identify all of them in the following footage. This part of the film starts near Pier 63, the Pavonia ferry terminal, opened in 1869, which served the Erie Railroad until 1958. Here we pass Pier 62, apparently in use by Grace Lines, who in later years occupied Piers 57 and 58. Pier 61 was in use by the Panama Pacific Lines, established in 1915 to carry passengers and freight between the US East and West coasts via the Panama Canal. Here at Pier 60, the United States Lines has a rather peculiar background, as this company was created by the United States Shipping Board, USSB, to operate German liners seized by the United States in 1917 during World War I. Only after 1932 did the company start to have its own ships built. At the time of this film, Pier 59 seems to be operated by the United States Lines in conjunction with the Italian line. However, at the time of the Titanic's fatal maiden voyage, it was operated by the White Star Line and would have been Titanic's pier of destination if it had reached New York. Pier 58 appears to have been in use by the United States Lines. Together with Pier 57, it would be assigned to Grace Lines in the 1960s. Here we see the French line occupying Pier 57. It was designated as the gateway to all of Europe. Famous ships like the Ile-de-France and SS France moored here. An obvious mistake that can be made is that the famous liner SS Normandy also moored here. However, the Normandy was too large for these piers and thus used the new harbour facilities more to the north at Pier 88. Moving further south, we respectively see pier numbers 56 to 52 come into view, that were in use by the Cunard line. Pier 55 is marked as Cunard White Star Line, following the merger of both companies on the 10th of May 1934. Pier 54, designated here to the Cunard line, is probably one of the most interesting piers in this film. It is from here that the SS Lusitania departed for Europe in 1915, but was hit by a German torpedo on the 7th of May off the coast of Ireland. 1,198 passengers and crew perished. Pier 54 also played a role during the sinking of the SS Titanic. It was here that the SS Carpathia brought the rescued passengers ashore. Pier 52 was in use by the Hudson River Night Line, which operated between ports along the River Hudson and New York. The Canadian Pacific Steamship Lines occupied Pier 51 and 50. At the time it had its headquarters in London and had an important role in transporting immigrants from Europe to the USA and Canada. The final two recognizable piers in this film, numbers 49 and 48, were designated to Morgan Lines. The company was owned by the City of New York and operated steamship services with smaller ships to destinations like New Orleans, Boston and Galveston. Our cameras are switched off for the remaining part of the journey south, until we go east at Battery Park and start filming again at the pier of the Staten Island ferries. Staten Island ferries. As we move further east, we see the three-arched building of the ferry to Governor's Island. Then we pass Pier 4 and not much later the IWW, Industrial Workers of the World building. Our journey then takes us north up the East River. This is the famous double-deck Brooklyn Bridge, built across the East River in 1883. It connects Brooklyn with Lower Manhattan. Just to the left of the bridge's pillar, the beautiful Singer Building comes into view, built between 1906 and 1908 and was sadly demolished in 1968. The names of more buildings will be added to the CC captions as soon as they get identified. We continue our journey up the East River. These are splendid images of the Thomas Edison power plant built around the turn of the century. Behind it, the Chrysler building can be clearly seen. Here we reach the beautiful Queensboro Bridge, built between 1903 and 1909, when it was opened. It is a two-level, double cantilever bridge, like the Forth Bridge in Scotland, and connects Long Island with the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Halfway it passes over Roosevelt's Island. New Yorkers call the bridge the 59th Street Bridge because it connects to that street. Sadly, the camera did not film the remainder of our trip up the East River, but gets switched on again as we move further along the Harlem River and pass underneath the High Bridge, built in 1848. The water tower can be seen just before we approach the bridge. Around 1930, there were only two bridges at this location across the Harlem River. The High Bridge and a couple of miles north the Washington Bridge, not to be confused with the George Washington Bridge. high bridge currently is a pedestrians-only bridge. In 1963 a third bridge was opened between both bridges, the Alexander Hamilton Bridge, which carries most of the traffic between Manhattan on the west and the Bronx in the east. Unlike many other locations in this film, a lot is barely recognizable today. The area is far more built up and the vegetation has overgrown many of the views. As we pass under the Washington Bridge, we say goodbye to Manhattan, not realizing that nearly a century later our adventure would be observed by thousands of YouTube viewers. Thanks for watching.